this is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Well, the holidays have come and gone once again, but if you've forgotten to get that special someone in your life a gift, well, Mint Mobile is extending their holiday offer of half off unlimited wireless. So here's the idea. You get it now. You call it an early present for next year. What do you have to lose? Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Limited time 50% off regular price for new customers. Upfront payment required. $45 for 3 months, $90 for 6 months, or $180 for 12-month plan. Taxes and fees extra. Speeds may slow after 50 gigabytes per month when network is busy. See terms.
This Sunday, iHeartRadio brings you live to Levi's Stadium in Santa Clara for the Super Bowl 60 tailgate concert, presented by NetApp. It's the ultimate pregame party, featuring an exclusive performance from Teddy Swims. Your front row experience will be on iHeartRadio stations across the country and the free iHeartRadio app this Sunday at 3:30 Eastern, 12:30 Pacific. Then, after the concert, tune in to the Super Bowl 60 pregame show on NBC.
Owning a home is full of surprises. Some wonderful, some not so much. And when something breaks, it can feel like the whole day unravels. That's why HomeServe exists. For as little as $4.99 a month, you'll always have someone to call. A trusted professional ready to help, bringing peace of mind to 4.5 million homeowners nationwide. For plans starting at just $4.99 a month, go to homeserve.com. That's homeserve.com. Not available everywhere. Most plans range between $4.99 to $11.99 a month your first year. Terms apply on covered repairs.
This message comes from Greenlight. Ready to start talking to your kids about financial literacy? Meet Greenlight, the debit card and money app that teaches kids and teens how to earn, save, spend wisely, and invest with your guardrails in place. With Greenlight, you can send money to kids quickly, set up chores, automate allowance, and keep an eye on what your kids are spending with real-time notifications. Join millions of parents and kids building healthy financial habits together on Greenlight. Get started risk-free at greenlight.com/iHeart.
Body Bags with JoeScott Morgan. A few years ago, I was at a party. I was sitting around a pool, actually down in New Orleans. I was no longer working with the coroner down there. I'd since moved on to the medical examiner, but it was a party of a group of us that had gotten together to create national standards for medical legal death investigators, and we were a very informal gathering. We'd been working really hard on this program for a couple of years, and it was finally coming to a conclusion. We were hanging out, having a few beers. One of the gentlemen that was there, I'd become pretty good friends with him, and he was from Colorado. As a matter of fact, he worked at the Denver coroner's office at the time. He was an interesting fellow because he had been a homicide detective in Denver, and prior to that, he had been a beat cop in Denver, which is how you kind of get your start before you make it into the Homicide Bureau. Overarching all of that, my friend had been a corpsman in the Navy, a combat corpsman that was assigned to a Marine Corps rifle company during Vietnam. And he had done several tours as a Navy corpsman. You know, in the Marine Corps, they refer to them as DOC, and they are held in very high esteem because they take care of these Marines. My friend told me a story that night that I'll never forget. When the Columbine massacre took place, it was not in Denver. It was in a location that didn't have the same level of resources. And what he told me was that he got summoned to that scene to lend a hand. And I remember sitting there and him looking at me and telling me, out of everything that he had seen in his career with the coroner's office in Denver, with the Homicide Bureau in Denver, and as a beat cop there in that major city, nothing scarred him as deeply as Columbine. And the way he described it, he said that when you walk in, you don't expect to see this level of violence in a public school. Today, we're going to talk about what it's like to be inside the tape on a mass homicide. I'm JoeScott Morgan, and this is Body Bags. With me is my friend Dave Mack. senior crime reporter with Crime Online with Nancy Grace. Dave, I pitched you this idea about this topic, mass shootings. I don't know if you were surprised when I pitched it to you, but right now, kind of in the environment that we're in, you hear a lot in the news media about social dynamics and causality and all those sorts of things. And there's one piece that's kind of missing that not too many people kind of explore, and that's what's it like to be on the scene of a mass shooting, a mass fatality event. What's that like? And I thought that maybe today we could just kind of leisurely have a discussion and allow me to give an insight into this.
When you first told me about it, I immediately thought school shootings, because that's what most of us tend to think about. When you think of mass shooting, you think school. But in reality, mass shootings encompass a whole lot more than school shootings. But you're right. I don't think I've ever been able to get over the fence of what's it like when you are on the scene of multiple deaths. And the injured are already gone. They've been injured, but they're at the hospital or they're being treated or what have you. But what do you do when you're opening the door on something that you only see in movies or on the battlefield? You mentioned Columbine. Death and destruction is all around. I don't know how you can be taught to get ready to process that. After Sandy Hook, there was a guy there, H. Wayne Carver III, was the former Connecticut chief medical examiner. His office examined the bodies of the victims. And when he gave his press conference, he was under a lot of scrutiny because of some of the things that he said and the way that he said them. And all I can think of is how impacted you would be as a human being to walk into this type of destruction and mayhem and try to determine what happened to the bodies. They're all different. They're all wounded differently, maybe by the same weapon, but they've all got different injuries. How do you even begin?
It is quite the spectacle. Over my career, I worked many mass shootings, and you have to frame this very carefully, because when people think that we've got a mass shooting event, most people think, you have numbers, like if you look at Vegas, for instance, where you're up in the double digits of fatalities. And that's not necessarily how a mass fatality or mass shooting event is defined. Some folks have said that it requires 4 or more. I never understand how they come to those numbers. This is the thing, depending upon where you are, one thing that might be a walk in the park for one department or agency, say a normal day, might be a disaster for, say, a smaller jurisdiction that's having to deal with multiple fatalities at one time. So that number might be lower in their estimation. The number that they kind of settle on is 4.
I always thought of a mass shooting as just indiscriminate killing of a group of people in one location.
Well, yeah, I guess you could put it that way, but you'll actually have these mass shooting events where people will migrate around. I was part of the investigation in what became known as the Buckhead shooting or the Buckhead massacre in Atlanta. I think it was 99, where you had Mark Barton that had left multiple locations, had moved from multiple locations, and had started off by killing his family.
I forgot about that one.
Yeah, yeah. Killed his family in an adjacent county, his wife and his two children, and then went to a day trading center. If nobody knows what that is, it's a place before the internet was at the status that it is now, where you would go in and you would do day trading with the stock market on these terminals, that you would go in and you'd pay a fee. You don't expect to walk into an office park and see people. One of the things that comes to mind is a woman lying face down in a business suit on the floor with a bullet hole in the back of her jacket and her shoes pushed over to the side. You know how people take their shoes off at their desk? You begin to put that together. You talked about battlefield, and battlefield in terms of, like, you think back to the Civil War, where we would just have thousands of people that were killed. It's not that you normalize that, but it's a battlefield. You're in the midst of a war. When you walk into an environment like a bank or a school, or this has occurred, some kind of business that's out there, and you have people deceased in these environments, it's kind of hard to understand it. It's certainly difficult, I think, for any normal human to process mentally, what you're taking in. How do you observe it? How do you make this make sense in your mind? Because it's not necessarily going to make sense. And then how do you go about processing the scene itself? That's where these cases are train wrecked in certain circumstances, where you have this kind of disorganization that takes place, or organization that does not take place beforehand. You're trying to compartmentalize everything in a scene so that you can work your way through it. It's not like you have one investigator that goes through and processes one body. You have teams that generally come in. And when you have this number of bodies that are there, you'll have these teams that are assembled outside the tape. You have to have a plan before you go under the tape, because if you don't, it's total and complete chaos. You have to systematically stand back and take a high altitude view of what you're walking into. Once the police have initially walked through, because this is the way you kind of break it down. You begin to think about when you have one of these events that occurs, first off, you're in life-saving mode. Okay. You're in life-saving mode. So when the first responders roll up there, they take the measure of what's going on, who is deceased, who still has life, and you begin to triage those people as best you can and get them out the door or get them off of the scene so that they can be saved. It's at that point in time you begin to kind of lay out the features of what you see before you. And that's why the people that first roll up at a scene, and this applies to any kind of death scene, the most valuable bit of information that you're ever going to get from a death scene is that person that arrived there first. That's why it's so important, like certain people that will dismiss young patrol officers and what they have to say at a scene. And that's the worst possible thing you can do. You want to get that person, sequester them, sit them down and say, what did you see? And get it as soon as you possibly can. That first bit of valuable information, if you're processing it like a crime scene at that moment in time, where you begin to try to understand where all of the bodies are located, what is the floor plan if it's within a building, what does this look like, how are we going to make it through each one of these until we complete the scene. And you have to treat these as if it is a singular homicide that took place in a singular freestanding structure. Do you see? I mean, if you don't, then first off, at a philosophical standpoint, you're being very dismissive.
So you mean when you come in, you're talking about this person was murdered in this spot, and you start there and you treat it as a singular event?
Yeah, you have to. And you process it that way. And you might not know who they are. Just imagine, if you will, particularly when it comes to schools, kids normally, if you're dealing with like an elementary school, don't have a wallet in their back pocket. I've famously said on several occasions, and I teach this all the time, I never trust government IDs anyway, but it's a place to start. And a little aside, I was actually at a conference one time where I was listening to one of the FBI technicians that worked the Oklahoma City bombing. It may have been one of the most heartbreaking things I have ever heard. And I saw this man actually begin to cry on stage in front of a big audience. And you say, well, why would he do that? Well, there were multiple deaths, obviously, at the Murrow building there in Oklahoma City. But do you remember, Dave, they had that daycare there?
I do, at the very bottom.
Yeah, at the very bottom. I can't remember which, the second or third floor, and it was almost immediately adjacent to essentially where the bomb blast initiated within that vehicle. Well, the bodies of those children were, to say the very least, particulate. You might have a disassociated hand or a finger or whatever that you had to roll a print off of. Well, just because you roll a print to get somebody identified doesn't necessarily mean that they have a print record. And what was so just gut-wrenching to listen to this man talk about, and still to this day, it just stirs me up inside when I think about it. he said because these children would not have a print record anywhere, they would have to go to the homes of these children that they suspected were there in that room, go into their playrooms and their nurseries and dust for latent prints and lift a print at the scene, take that print and compare it to what they had at the state medical examiner's office. Oklahoma City, their state medical examiner there did a fantastic job where they had a morgue facility all set up, and they had stations, and you do this lots of times with mass fatalities, in particular plane accidents and things like that. You have multiple stations that the remains have to pass through. They'll go through anthropology, odontology, which is dentistry, fingerprint, x-ray, until they finally make it to the medical examiner who will perform an autopsy. That story that he told, though, just trying to determine who they are. And that's stuff that I think that most people don't think about. Is such a hill to climb, just basic things like identification. Because when you walk in cold to a mass fatality event or a mass shooting event, there's no guarantee that you're going to know, first off, who was in that space. Two events that have occurred at the time of this taping that are desperately different. We had the mass shooting event that took place at the Covenant School in Nashville. Well, that's a very contained environment where you have accountability relative to the students that would be there and the staff. You have an expectation that they would be there, but you go to a public space like a bank and a shooting takes place. Well, you don't know who's going to be walking into the lobby of a bank at any given time, who's there before opening, who has access to that environment. And then kick it up another notch. I go back to Vegas. All of those people that were at that concert that were just standing there listening to the music that was being played on the stage. How do you know at any given time who is in that audience? It's a difficult thing to assess. And we haven't even talked about assessment of injuries, the location that they were found relative to everybody else, all of those things. So it's almost like when you're working one of these things, everything that you do as a death investigator, the difficulty increases.
That never occurred to me. 19 children on the second floor at Murrah, and they had to identify fingers. I didn't even think about that. 2 weeks ago, a documentary being filmed about the Palm Sunday tornado in Piedmont. Well, I'm one of the people they're using because, I was in it. And they talked about the, children that were killed there. My father-in-law at the time, they thought I was wrong. When I put Andrew, my son, on the ambulance with a fractured skull, I put him on the ambulance. Well, they thought because everybody around me was dead where we were in the church that I was mistaken. And because he was a kindergartner and the other kindergartners were all dead, they sent my father-in-law over to this area of a carport where they had taken all the kindergartners, the dead ones, and they had laid them out and covered them with a blanket. And they took my father-in-law over there and pulled the blanket back to have him identify Andrew. And so he had to look at all these 5-year-olds looking for his grandson. That's got to be more powerful and traumatic than just about anything. And of course, Andrew wasn't there, but I carried that with me.
Oh, it's horrible. It truly is.
This Sunday, iHeartRadio brings you live to Levi's Stadium in Santa Clara for the Super Bowl 60 tailgate concert, presented by NetApp. It's the ultimate pregame party, featuring an exclusive performance from Teddy Swims. Your front row experience will be on iHeartRadio stations across the country and the free iHeartRadio app this Sunday at 3:30 Eastern, 12:30 Pacific. Then, after the concert, tune in to the Super Bowl 60 pregame show on NBC.
Now I'd like to introduce you to Meaningful Beauty, the famed skincare brand created by iconic supermodel Cindy Crawford. It's her secret to absolutely gorgeous skin. Meaningful Beauty makes powerful and effective skincare simple, and it's loved by millions of women. It's formulated for all ages and all skin tones and types, and it's designed to work as a complete skincare system, leaving your skin feeling soft, smooth, and nourished. I recommend starting with Cindy's full regimen, which contains all 5 of her best-selling products, including the amazing youth-activating melon serum. This next generation serum has the power of melon leaf stem cell technology. It's melon leaf stem cells encapsulated for freshness and released onto the skin to support a visible reduction in the appearance of wrinkles. With thousands of glowing 5-star reviews, why not give it a try? Subscribe today and you can get the amazing Meaningful Beauty system for just $49.95. That includes our introductory 5-piece system, free gifts, free shipping, and a 60-day money-back guarantee. All of that available at meaningfulbeauty.com.
Well, the holidays have come and gone once again, but if you've forgotten to get that special someone in your life a gift, well, Mint Mobile is extending their holiday offer of half off unlimited wireless. So here's the idea. You get it now, you call it an early present for next year. What do you have to lose? Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Limited time 50% off regular price for new customers. Upfront payment required. $45 for 3 months, $90 for 6 months, or $180 for 12-month plan. Taxes and fees extra. Speeds may slow after 50 gigabytes per month when network is busy. See terms.
Are you a fraud-paying American? It's a fact that 1 in 4 honest, hard-working, tax-paying Americans has been a victim of identity theft. With LifeLock Identity Theft Protection, though, if your identity is stolen, they fix it, guaranteed, and get you your money back. Last year, the IRS flagged over $16 billion in refunds for identity fraud. That's billions of dollars that could come from your salary, overtime, or second job. But this year, you don't need to stay a victim. LifeLock monitors millions of data points per second for your personal information and alerts you to threats you could easily miss on your own. And if your information does fall into the wrong hands, only LifeLock has U.S.-based restoration specialists who are backed by the $1 Million Protection Package. Because this tax season, fraud-paying American is something no American should have to claim. Visit LifeLock.com/iHeart and save up to 40% your first year. That's 40% off at LifeLock.com/iHeart. Terms apply.
To see those things that many cannot take the measure of is something as a death investigator, I don't know that I ever got used to it, even after all of those years. And when people ask me to explain that, I have trouble sometimes. I have trouble kind of expressing that. I think that there are people that would ask, as it applies to the dead, and because I was around the dead so much, I said, were you ever afraid of the dead? And Dave, I got to tell you, I'm never afraid of the dead. I feel very safe and secure with the dead. It's the living that I fear.
When we're talking about this, and sometimes the line will get blurred between a mass casualty event versus a mass shooting event. Because in the case of a mass shooting event, oftentimes the perpetrator of the crime has planned other mayhem to go along and coincide with it, oftentimes to pick off the first responders, to cause additional damage. So when you show up at an event where you have to try to figure out what took place and you've got victims, and how do you know the scene's clear? How do you know that there's not something over here in this corner that might be covered up, but is going to explode? How do you know that?
The bigger the area, for me, and I'm speaking for me, not anybody else, it was always in the back of my mind that this area where the shooting took place was targeted for a reason. So does that mean that the initial event, as horrific as it was it set up in order to draw other people in? And we've seen this, and this is preached to you when you're learning to, first off, secure scenes, and then when you're also learning to process scenes, that if you're talking about events, say, for instance, if there is an explosive device, that there could be what they refer to as secondary devices. We saw this happen with Eric Rudolph and clinic bombings, abortion clinic bombings, where I think there was one where there was a bomb that initially went off, and then when the responders arrived there was another one that went off that was adjacent or in a dumpster. And so you're always thinking about that. It's a very military way of looking at things. If you can draw an initial group of people in and do great harm to them, you're going to draw other people there to begin to assess the scene. And they very well might be the target. So you have that, I think, working in the back of your mind. At least I did. And again, I can't speak for everybody that does this. Some people will say, well, I'll just put it out of my mind and I go ahead and do what I have to do. You can say that, and that's fine if you choose to say that. But there's always that specter that exists, because what you're seeing before you, and just kind of understand this. What you're seeing before you as you compare it, I think, in your mind as a death investigator, compare it to, say, a singular shooting that has taken place that maybe you worked recently where you had a drive-by shooting or you had somebody that was killed in a domestic dispute. They say that that evil is evil, but there are degrees to what havoc there exists. And when you see the depths that some people will go to, the expansiveness of it, you really think, is there something else here? Is there something else that could wind up doing you harm? And for me, I found myself as a person that would process a scene to be greatly distracted by it. The Buckhead shooting that I was involved with in Atlanta in 99, we had what was called the Adamsville massacre that had just taken place the week before, Dave. The week before. And we had, I know I'm going to get the number wrong, it was either 7 or 8 people killed in that event, literally the week before the Buckhead, and you never heard about it. And I was physically there in this home that was maybe 1,100 square feet. You're having to process, and there was so much blood in the scene that I actually fell down. I fell down. I was wearing a Tyvek suit and I actually slipped and fell in the blood. And there was another one of my colleagues that actually pulled a muscle because they slipped in blood and pulled their hamstring. But the floor was just covered, but you're having to take your time to work your way through this very confined. It's very claustrophobic. We had people that had been killed and this is the thing about it, when you go to interpret one of these things, you try to determine the sequencing, which is difficult to do many times. But I'll never forget, there was a young girl in the Adamsville case. I think she was 14, and she was laying in a single-size bed, face down. She had her pajamas on, and she had a perfect bullet hole right between her shoulder blades. And she died in that position as she was sleeping. And then people scattered. There was an awareness that something was going on in the home at that moment in time. You had children that were dead in the hallway. You had one child that had taken refuge in a closet. The person put the gun inside the closet and just began to fire into the closet and kill them there. And so the volume of trauma and the volume of blood that was spilled in this environment made it very difficult to process the scene, for one, because you had this commingling of body fluids. The bodies were lying in close proximity to one another. So to process them individually to try to determine sequencing in this confined space, it made it very difficult to do. When you're working these, it's a Herculean task to take on more than 2 of these victims as an investigator. You have limits intellectually to what you can kind of handle at one moment in time when you're attempting to assess the position that they're in, the status of their postmortem changes. And with Adamsville, when that took place, it was hours before these bodies were found. I think that there was a survivor, if I remember correctly. He was like 11 years old and emerged from that home, and he had been shot in the arm and made his way to a neighbor's house several hours after all of this had occurred. So these bodies had already started to go through changes at this point. So that's something you're trying to get a handle on as well. So there's a lot of moving parts to it as an investigator to really remain focused on the task at hand as opposed to getting distracted by all of the other things. It's easy to walk outside of the scene to catch your breath or to get a drink of water because you're sweating to death in this environment. You're wearing a Tyvek suit, and then you're taxed mentally because you think that you're forgetting things, and you look out and on the street, there's nothing but satellite trucks that are out there. And it doesn't go unnoticed, okay, by those that are out there. And that's another element to this. When you begin to work these cases, you might not have a sense that you're in the middle of the national news cycle as an investigator, but you soon discover that there's evidence of it all around you. And I have to think that in my circumstance, in that 2-week period, the Adamsville event really kind of, I think in one way, prepared my office, the personnel there, for what was to happen the next week with Buckhead shooting.
Well, let me ask you, because you've used it a couple of different times. You've said Tyvek suit. Is that like a hazmat type suit?
Yeah, it is. It's one of these white suits. Some people will refer to them as bunny suits, I guess. You have the white suit that you put on over your regular clothing. It does a couple of things. It protects you from this environment that you're going to be in. Remember, I told you about slipping in blood. And that's not the first time that's happened in my career, but there was so much at that scene because it was so heavily concentrated in those areas. But it also protects the scene from you. I mentioned my buddy Edmond Lecard chronically on the show. And, you know, Edmond famously said that every contact leaves a trace. So anything that you bring in from the outside will be deposited at this scene. And if I have something in my vehicle that's stuck to the sole of my shoe, when I walk into that scene, I'm going to introduce that item in there. And you want to try to keep it as pristine as you possibly can. Sometimes that's not possible, but you try to do that as best you can.
You start tracking stuff into a crime scene like that with all the blood around, you could really do damage to the investigation.
Yeah, you could. And again, when you're talking about mass shooting or a mass fatality event, it's chaotic to begin with. And you're going through these mental checklists to make sure that you've got everything covered and that everybody on the team is on the same sheet of music, if you will. So when you're working the scene, generally the individual teams are going to be made up of an ME investigator, a homicide detective, a crime scene photographer. And so you've got this 3-person team that will go in and process each body. Okay. Now there might be an overall lead detective that will put everything together in total from the police perspective. If you still have a living victim, and in many of these cases where you have the mass shooting events, you'll have the shooter that will take their own life. You're working a mass homicide/suicide many times, or the shooter has been taken out by the police as well. Well, now that's still a homicide. Even though the police take them out, that's a homicide because it's death at the hands of another. So you have to process this thing as if it's an unknown.
So you have to identify everybody like that?
Yeah, you have to. You know, the specter of the court is always there. The specter of the prosecution and the defense is always there. When I'm teaching, I teach my students from this perspective because they're college students. They've never had any experience. When you're processing a scene, when you're working a scene, you behave as if there's a 12-member jury at that crime scene with you and they're watching everything that you do. And that if you want to kick it up another level, pretend that there's a defense attorney there watching everything that you do. So everything has to be documented. Even when it's a mass fatality event, even if you perceive that the person responsible for this is now deceased, either at their own hand or at the hand of the police officers, this is still an active case, and it is an active case. What I'm about to say, I'm not saying this from a police standpoint. I'm saying this from a medical legal perspective. If it's a homicide and there's nobody to prosecute, okay, the police will handle that their own way. But for us, just because you've got an event that's seemingly not something that is necessarily prosecutable, for us, there are other considerations. First off, we have to, like I said, determine who these individuals are. And just because the shooter or the alleged shooter is deceased, that doesn't mean that there's not going to be something moving forward in the court. You have a whole nother world that the medical legal side of the house is attached to, and that's civil court. And there are always civil things that arise out of these mass shooting events, whether they're suing the parties responsible for security or they're suing a gun manufacturer, whoever it is. There will always be those questions. And if you don't answer those questions at that moment in time, when you're there to process the scene and then subsequently do the examinations on these bodies, you'll never have that opportunity again.
This Sunday, iHeartRadio brings you live to Levi's Stadium in Santa Clara for the Super Bowl 60 tailgate concert, presented by NetApp. It's the ultimate pregame party, featuring an exclusive performance from Teddy Swims. Your front row experience will be on iHeartRadio stations across the country and the free iHeartRadio app this Sunday at 3:30 Eastern, 12:30 Pacific. Then, after the concert, tune in to the Super Bowl 60 pregame show on NBC.
Now I'd like to introduce you to Meaningful Beauty, the famed skincare brand created by iconic supermodel Cindy Crawford. It's her secret to absolutely gorgeous skin. Meaningful Beauty makes powerful and effective skincare simple, and it's loved by millions of women. It's formulated for all ages and all skin tones and types, and it's designed to work as a complete skincare system, leaving your skin feeling soft, smooth, and nourished. I recommend starting with Cindy's full regimen, which contains all 5 of her best-selling products, including the amazing youth-activating melon serum. This next generation serum has the power of melon leaf stem cell technology. It's melon leaf stem cells encapsulated for freshness and released onto the skin to support a visible reduction in the appearance of wrinkles. With thousands of glowing 5-star reviews, why not give it a try? Subscribe today and you can get the amazing Meaningful Beauty system for just $49.95. That includes our introductory 5-piece system, free gifts, free shipping, and a 60-day money-back guarantee. All of that available at meaningfulbeauty.com.
Did you know that parents rank teaching financial literacy as the toughest life skill? That's where Greenlight comes in, the debit card and money app made for families. With Greenlight, you can send money to kids quickly, set up chores, automate allowance, and track spending with real-time notifications. Kids learn how to earn, save, and spend responsibly, while parents have peace of mind, knowing smart money habits are being built with guardrails in place. Try Greenlight risk-free today at greenlight.com/iHeart. That's greenlight.com/iHeart.
Support for the show comes from Public, the investing platform for those who take it seriously. On Public, you can build a multi-asset portfolio of stocks, bonds, options, crypto, and now generated assets, which allow you to turn any idea into an investable index with AI. It all starts with your prompt. From renewable energy companies with high free cash flow to semiconductor suppliers growing revenue over 20% year over year, you can literally type any prompt and put the AI to work. It screens thousands of stocks, builds a one-of-a-kind index, and lets you backtest it against the S&P 500. Then you can invest in a few clicks. Generated assets are like ETFs with infinite possibilities, completely customizable and based on your thesis, not someone else's. Go to public.com/podcast and earn an uncapped 1% bonus when you transfer your portfolio. That's public.com/podcast. Paid for by Public Investing. Brokerage services by Open to the Public Investing Inc. Member FINRA and SIPC. Advisory services by Public Advisors LLC, SEC registered advisor. Generated assets is an interactive analysis tool. Output is for informational purposes only and is not an investment recommendation or advice. Complete disclosures available at public.com/disclosures.
Why is never sufficient. I've said this over and over, and I will say it till my last breath. Why questions will drive you to insanity. And when you have mass fatalities, those why questions rise to the top. But for us in our world, in the world of forensics, why is insufficient? We have to determine when, where, how. And trust me, there's enough to explore with those for us. And the whys can be left to the politicians and the sociologists and the psychologists. But for us in forensics, it's those other matters that concern us more.
For a long time, I've wondered why these things have to be so drawn out. For instance, if you already know who did it, okay, it's not even questionable. This is the guy who did the shooting. In the case of yesterday, Connor Sturgeon, we know Connor Sturgeon walked into a bank where he worked and he shot people. We know he's dead. So why do we now have to go and figure all this out? We know he shot people. We know that's why they're dead. So why do we have to then go in and break it all down like we don't know that?
Because it is, I think, just from a moral standpoint, it's a disservice to the family members. Pushing aside all of the legal requirements, okay, everything that's dictated by the law for the medical legal community that we have to do. These are homicide victims. We examine and process and investigate homicides in a particular way. And the moment, and I mean the moment, that you deviate from that standard practice that is a moment in time when you find yourself in the middle of a minefield. I'll give you another example. When you have someone, say, for instance, is executed by the state, okay, they're on death row and execution takes place, guess what? They're going to be autopsied. And people say, well, what's the purpose of that? What in the world would you gain by doing an autopsy on a person that has been executed, where it was literally witnessed by all of these people? Well, first off, it's prescribed by law because this is an in-custody death. And if any questions arise in the future, and they always do, you have to be prepared to answer those questions. With Connor Sturgeon, right now, at this moment in time, the authorities are saying that he is responsible for this event and he is now deceased. What if there's the off chance that someone else may have had involvement? That person is still living and breathing. I'm not saying that there are. I'm just saying that could arise. And if it does, are you prepared to answer that question? Can you imagine how foolish a medical examiner would appear if they said, you know what, we know that this is a multiple homicide. It was, according to the police, perpetrated by this individual. There's no need to do the autopsies. No, there is a need to do the autopsies, because if these questions are not asked and answered at that moment in time, you'll never have a chance to ask and answer again.
I've got a two-parter for you that really has been hanging on for a long time with me. You've got a mass shooting. You've examined it, and you have X number of people that are now dead. Do they all have to be autopsied, all of the victims? I mean, I understand the suspect in the case having to be autopsied, but do all of these innocent victims have to be autopsied? And part two of that is, what do you do if somebody has a religious problem with an autopsy? There are some religions that don't believe their body should be autopsied. It goes against their faith.
Well, the first part of that question, every person will be autopsied. I have distinct memories of walking into an autopsy room where I've had a multiple homicide and where a family has been wiped out, for instance. And the family, if you can imagine this, is all lined up on the autopsy gurneys, which these gurneys are very specially made that we have. I won't go into great graphic detail, but they're each pushed up to a sink. The feet are on these things. And literally, I've been looking down the line. I remember one case where I had a family of 5, and the son killed everybody, and they're all lined up. The son is at the end, and they're all going to be autopsied at the same time. Well, I have evidence down at the end that demonstrates to me, at least in my own mind, that individual probably brought about the deaths of these. Okay. But there is always a question that will arise. And depending upon what the law dictates in a particular jurisdiction, the law very well might say that the body has to, at minimum, be examined. And there's kind of a rule of thumb that applies as well. If this is, say, for instance, a firearms-related death, and this even applies to suicides, every office I've ever been affiliated with, we don't like to bury bullets. If there is a round in a body, we're going after that round, whether it's in the head or if it's in the trunk of the body. We're still going after that. That is a bit of evidence that has to be recovered. It's going to be heavily dependent upon who is administrating that office at any particular time. But I think that caution is the watchword, and to take the conservative view here to say that there is always a problem that might arise, and that if you don't do this autopsy at this particular time, if anything does arise, well, what are you going to do after the body has been sent to the crematory? Or what are you going to do after the body is vaulted somewhere or put into a mausoleum, and now you got to get an order of exhumation? It's better to go ahead and do it now. To the point of you can go and chat with 10 people randomly, and they're all going to come from different belief backgrounds. And there are some belief systems out there that really frown upon autopsies. I don't know if I've mentioned it before, but I've actually been present when we had an ultra-Orthodox Jewish gentleman that had unfortunately taken his own life. He drowned himself in a swimming pool, and our coroner was bound and determined to have that autopsy performed. And we did autopsy him. There was actually a rabbi there that was soaking up every bit of blood as we were doing the autopsy, even bone dust, because all of those elements from a spiritual standpoint had to be buried with the body. And that was kind of fascinating. So yeah, we do have people that protest against having autopsies performed, and sometimes those will be based on religious beliefs. The medical legal authority by law We'll take that into consideration, but at the end of the day, these individuals the medical legal authority will trump any protestation on the part of the family, and families go to get injunctions and all kinds of things. I've been in the middle of those cases before where the family's just saying they don't want the autopsy done. I have found that many times when you don't do the autopsies in those cases, and this is a very cynical view, many times it's the same families that 6 months later say, why didn't you do the autopsy? So it's better to be safe than sorry. I'm JoeScott Morgan, and this is Body Bags.
This Sunday, iHeartRadio brings you live to Levi's Stadium in Santa Clara for the Super Bowl 60 tailgate concert, presented by NetApp. It's the ultimate pregame party, featuring an exclusive performance from Teddy Swims. Your front row experience will be on iHeartRadio stations across the country and the free iHeartRadio app this Sunday at 3:30 Eastern, 12:30 Pacific. Then, after the concert, tune in to the Super Bowl 60 pregame show on NBC.
Are you a fraud-paying American? 1 in 4 tax-paying Americans has been a victim of identity fraud. With LifeLock, if your identity is stolen, they fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Last year, billions in refunds were stolen. Could be from your salary, overtime, or second job. Gone. But this year, you don't need to stay a victim, because this tax season, fraud-paying American is something no American should have to claim. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit lifelock.com/iHeart. Terms apply.
At CVS, it matters that we're not just in your community, but that we're part of it. It matters that we're here for you when you need us, day or night. And we want everyone to feel welcomed and rewarded. It matters that CVS is here to fill your prescriptions and here to fill your craving for a tasty and, healthy snack. At CVS, we're proud to serve your community because we believe where you get your medicine matters. So visit us at cvs.com or just come by our store. We can't wait to meet you. Store hours vary by location.
You ever wonder how far an EV can take you on one charge? Well, most people drive about 40 miles a day, which means you can do all daily stuff no problem. Go to work, grab the kids at school, get the groceries, and still have enough charge to visit your in-laws in the next county. But they don't need to know that. And the best part, you won't have to buy gas at all. The way forward is electric. Explore EVs that fit your life at electricforall.org.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.